Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Thornton. You can see this little smile. You know it's coming, right? And yes, I know this is going to cause a shitstorm, but I do feel that now is the time I could finally make this video. I have wanted to make this video for a long time, and I think I can do it now. I think I've ran enough tests on this channel to do it. What I want to do today is I kind of want to give you my viewpoint, and it is just a viewpoint because in the end, the tool that's right for you is the one that sounds best to you, the one that fits your budget, and the one that you can use to get the best results. Everything is subjective. This is just my opinion. Everything I say in this video is purely my opinion that I've made via my own tests, which again, the results are subjective because everybody hears things differently. In regards to the differences of analog versus digital, in regards to plugins versus hardware, in regards to qualitative differences, I would say that overall it's extremely hit and miss. We all know, and come on, you're an idiot if you say that hardware is better than plugins in every form possible. No, that's bullshit. Hardware is limited, right? We know that, right? We know that a lot of the times you can only get mono units. So for example, in the Pultecs are mono only, where in the plugins you can get stereo, you can do mid-sides, you can do so many things with plugins. That's the reason that software has become so popular, is that it can model hardware and add things to the hardware that isn't possible in the analog domain. With the Brainwork stuff, you've got the TMT, you've got the mono maker, stereo width, many compressors have got external sidechains that you don't have in the hardware, etc, 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 etc. You know what I'm talking about. However, at the exact same time, I would be an idiot to say that all plugins sound better than hardware, because that is not true. There are plugins that genuinely just don't sound as good as hardware, in my subjective opinion. And probably on average, I would say probably 80% of plugins, maybe that's a bit harsh, but I'm gonna say 80% of plugins normally don't kind of get that analog sound. And you may be asking, Paul, what is that analog sound? Again, it's very subjective. What I will say is that the depth thing that many people talk about, yes, it's there sometimes, but guess what? Plugins add depth as well. Many people that tell me on my Pultec shootout that there's this depth to the hardware, there's no way you're picking that out blind. I very much doubt it. I critically listen on every test, and I've sat with those files for ages and ages and ages. And if I listen to it and I'm like, right, that's practically identical, and I can't consistently pick them out in a blind test, I very much doubt that you're going to be able to pick them out. You might be able to, but in regards to those differences, if I'm critically listening and I've set up the tests, I am telling you, it's that much of a difference. It's not this difference of all this depth. No, it just isn't there. If there was that much of a big difference in depth, I would be able to pick it out consistently. And here is the word for me that describes this whole analog versus digital debate. And I don't want to get into the debate. I just want to speak about guys starting out on their journey who feel that they need to invest in analog gear to become a better mixer. For me, the word that best describes this whole shitstorm is inconsistency. There is massive inconsistencies when it comes to comparing hardware to other hardware. There's inconsistencies in comparing plugins to other hardware. And the main reason why there is so much inconsistency is because hardware and analog gear, right, is inconsistent. They are inconsistent because every piece of analog gear is different. You can get 5 Pultecs, 5 1176s, and 5 LE2As, and guess what? They'll all have different nuances. So when you are comparing analog to digital, you've always got to try and make sure in a perfect world that you had the plugin that perfectly emulated that exact same hardware unit that you are comparing. And obviously, 98% of people don't have that luxury. So we do the closest comparisons that we can. And in regards to the comparisons that I've made on the channel, I would say that there's certain things that the plugins struggle with. What you'll find with a lot of hardware units, especially transformer units, is that there's this low weight. You can't just add it in with an EQ. It's like a harmonic build-up thing. And I normally hear it in transformer-based gear. Transformer-based gear that's pushed hard and makes a lot of harmonic distortion. 1176s are again, a very good example of that. That's why 1176s have this kind of heft and weight to them and kind of sit forward a little bit. They're aggressive in their compression. And for whatever reason, there are many plugins that just really seem not to kind of be able to nail it. I don't know why that is. I'm not a plugin developer. But just because there are plugins out there that can't nail that kind of low transformer weight thing doesn't mean that no plugin can. And I know you are tired of hearing about it, but it is true. Tim Petherick's convolution plugins are, in my opinion, and to many others, the best in the box. His compressors are second to none, in my personal opinion. He's the most consistent guy in any shootout I've done. I'm pretty sure, I think, I may be 4, but I definitely know for certain that I've done an LA2A comparison with Tim, a DBX 160A, and an SSL G-Bus. I might be missing one, but either way, in those 3 that I can remember, I picked out Tim's over the hardware blind, level matched. I had the physical DBX 160A in my hands. I bought it and I sold it because I didn't need it. Tim's gave me that sound. This is probably, to me, the reason why I can make this video now is because the reality of the results of my tests are that not many people can actually tell the difference. Acustica Magenta, for example, like, I loved that one because I'd done the test and I was like, fuck, this sounds identical. Nobody's going to be able to tell the difference. And know what? A Manly owner, a guy that owned a Manly Verimue was like, nah, Paul, I've done my own tests and I can't get it as close as you could. So he gave me a file in the settings of his own Manly Verimue. He was like, there's a track that I've done. These are the settings. I want you to see how close you can get it. The problem that engineer had that he didn't know at the time was that he didn't really understand the Acustica plugin as much as he should have. There were certain things that I was able to adapt. I was able to change the schmod. I was able to set the pre in regards to the harmonics just right. Just all these kind of subtle nuances that I could tweak to get it close. He just kind of went, right, it should sound like it out the box, where I tweaked with it. And then after I tweaked with it, I did a second video and I got, again, practically identical to his hardware Manly Verimue. So I done 2 Manly Verimue tests with the same plugin, 2 different Manly Verimues, and on both occasions I managed to get them near identical. And the Manly Verimue is, I don't know, what is it, fucking $3,500 or something? It might not be as much as that. But either way, let's call it $3,500, $3,000. It's $3,000 that you don't need, because I know that Acustica Magenta can do it. But just because Acustica Magenta nailed it doesn't mean to say that the rest of Acustica plugins nail it, because I've done many tests where Acustica compressors just aren't set right. Their attack envelopes aren't right. They're just not right to the point where I don't even like them compared to other plugins. I actually find other plugins sound better than them. So again, inconsistency. Another good example is the API 5500 mastering grade EQ. I compared that to the Acustica API EQs, the Lindell 50 channel, and also the UAD API Vision channel strip. And guess what? Acustica wasn't really close. Lindell wasn't close, but the UAD was practically identical, to the point where there's times where I could pick out the hardware and there was other times where I would end up picking the UAD. They were just very, very, very close, and I was very, very inconsistent in the blind test. There was times where I thought I preferred the UAD, and there's times I thought I preferred the hardware. That tells me that they're practically identical because I can't consistently pick them out. So there's times where plugin devs get it right, and there's times where plugin devs get it wrong. Software is getting more and more and more advanced, and definitely more CPU efficient over the years, which is allowing them to get rid of a lot of that aliasing. They're able to make saturation plugins that have the saturation of analog gear but don't suffer from digital artifacts as much. So digital is definitely closing the gap. Just have a look at the Studer tape shootout that I done. So I took a Studer tape from Mix Analog. I bounced every single stem through the tape machine so you can get the overall build-up of recording to tape. I did that with various tape plugins, and guess what? In the overall test, I preferred the UAD Studer. And this is where the psychology comes in, because what I found so interesting about the Studer video, the tape machine video, was many people hadn't watched the video all the way through. So there was parts where I kind of shown you which was which, and many people were like, yeah. The real tape's awesome. Definitely, the real tape is the one I would pick every day of the week. And then I would ask them, well, what did you pick in the blind test? I picked whatever it is, A. I'm like, you picked the UAD. I know, right, it's done. As soon as you pick one in a blind test, it's game over. If you're going to spend all that money on a fucking tape machine, right, what's a tape machine? I don't know, 15 grand? Probably a Studer, probably 15, 16 grand maybe. If you have a level matched blind test and you can't pick that difference in quality in a blind test, then there is no justification in that 15, 16 grand, in my opinion. And if that's not enough proof for you, the Helios one, which I'm going to tell you is now, and I'm glad I can finally tell you, I've waited a long time for this. When I did the Helios compressor, I did it versus the Waves Kramer Pi, and I was shocked, because we all know the way I think about Waves, and in regards to most of their emulations, they're always the ones that are the most furthest behind in regards for plugins sounding like hardware. But in this instance, it just absolutely nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. I just love it, right? Because I'm a smug little prick, all right? When I did the poll and I asked people, I gave them 3 options, and I said, right, is it that, or, I've never done this before, can you tell the difference, right? Are you admitting that, yeah, I just can't tell which is which? They just sound way too similar. And I'm going to show you here, I've not checked it, I should have checked it before I watched the video, but the last time I checked, it was like, I don't know, it was like 70% or close to 70% of people voted that they genuinely couldn't hear the difference or pick which was which in the fucking blind test. And there was a lot of votes on that poll. And I love going back to the video, because in the comments, there's lots and lots and lots of people, many people, that got it wrong. That were like, no, I could definitely hear, like, that Helios sounds way better than the Waves. Honestly, every day of the week, I would pick the hardware. And I asked them, which one did you pick? Which one did you pick in the blind test? I picked that one. Wrong! Some people got it right. And I will say, my channel member, Gerard, or I don't know if it's Gerard or Gerard, I don't know how the Germans say it, but yeah, you got it right. If there's anybody that's going to be happy that they got it right, it'll be him. But there was many people that were fucking adamant. They were like, yeah, hardware's better, and failed the blind test and picked the Waves. You know what? There's times where there's just plugins that aren't that good, and I only look at plugins that are good. I don't look at the shit ones. There's a lot of plugins out there that are cheap and nasty and just don't do a very good job in terms of emulating the hardware, but there's others that are good. The 33609, for example, you know what I mean? It's like, I spent the longest time in my head thinking, yeah, like, I've done nearly every 33609 plugin I could think of, and it does not compare to what the hardware 33609 does, until the Arturia 33609 came up, done the shootout, was able to set it a certain way using the advanced section, and guess what? I got that sound that I wanted. And I was like, yes, I cannot now justify that like 3.5 grand for a Neve 33609 hardware. I know in my heart of hearts that I can't justify it. That kind of depth that people talk about, and yes, in that first comparison, and in general, yes, the 33609, there is a depth to it. There's a depth to like an SSL G-Bus compressor, but the Slate SSL like G-Bus compressor, that is very, very close, and one of the best. SSL's own even isn't as close, but Tim P's absolutely nailed it. And that these are the examples where hardware does sound awesome, there is depth, but plugins can do it, and the Arturia can do it. It's the only 33609 on the market. Even UED couldn't do it. Again, inconsistency. There's times where UED get it, there's times where UED don't get it. In my opinion, the Arturia 33609 gives me that depth and sound of that specific Neve 33609. But, right, generally speaking, right, if you are somebody that's starting out in this industry and you want to be a mixing engineer, right, you receive tracks, you mix them. I can say, from my standpoint and from my personal opinion, that you do not need to invest in analog gear. Analog gear in today's modern world is not going to give you that extra 5-10% that you think it's going to give you. It just isn't. There is never this big, massive qualitative difference that I hear that makes me think I need hardware. The truth is, many people buy analog gear because they see other engineers with it and it looks cool and it gives them this prestige, and they could say to somebody, my mix goes through that and that's worth $3,000.
Who gives a fucking shit?
A tool is only as good as the person that's using them. So if you don't fully understand how to get the best out of it, fuck it, it's going to sound shit. I could simply just like start the video and say, Serban Ganea doesn't need analog gear. He mixes in the box. End of story. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because in the end, you've got guys like Manny Marroquin and I think Jason Joshua and stuff. A lot of guys that are hybrid that still use analog gear. They use analog gear because they've got it or they've got access to it. They like some of it and they'll use it. I just really don't want modern engineers coming up in this industry to think that they need to spend money on analog gear and not on investing in themselves, not becoming a better mixer, paying for lessons or paying for like fucking mix courses, paying for better acoustical treatment and better monitoring systems, a good acoustically treated fucking room if you're using monitors, and make sure that they're good monitors, ensure that you're sitting in the right place, training your ears to pick out like subtle nuances. People that tell you that, yeah, I spent all this money on this gear and it makes me a better mixer. Fuck it, I'm just going to say it. Probably aren't that good a mixer, to be honest with you. If you rely on analog gear to make good mixes, you surely can't be that good a mixer because you rely on analog gear to make a good mix. Could I make a good mix with stock plugins? Yeah, I think I could. Could I make a good mix with analog? Yeah, I think I could. And do I think I could make a good mix, or do I know I could make a good mix, in my opinion, with the plugins of my choosing? Absolutely. It's all tools at the end of the day. It's just that hardware is very, very, very expensive. This is a long video, my God. I've said what I've said. There we go. Check the analog versus digital shootouts if you want to have more context. Can't wait to argue with you in the comments down below. It's going to be fun for a week until I forget about it. But either way, I've done it. I've said it. Let the shitstorm commence, and I'll see you again next week on Mixing